President Trump has announced a bold new move, a 25% tariff on any country that buys Venezuelan oil, effective April 2nd, framing the decision as part of a broader security and immigration crackdown. Trump claims Venezuela has secretly funneled tens of thousands of violent criminals, including members of the notorious gang Tren de Aragua, into the United States. The tariff is not just an economic sanction, it's a message. And it comes with a new campaign slogan, Liberation Day. This script dives deep into why Trump is targeting Venezuelan oil now, what Liberation Day really means, how wartime powers are being revived, and what this means for U.S. allies, the border, and the global oil market. Why Venezuela? Why now? The backdrop is twofold. A porous southern border with rising illegal entries, evidence that the Venezuelan regime is exploiting U.S. asylum policy to offload criminals. Trump alleges that President Nicolas Maduro's regime orchestrated the migration of cartel members, violent felons, and operatives into the U.S., knowing America's border is vulnerable. At the center of this is the Tren de Aragua, a hyper-violent Venezuelan gang linked to drug trafficking, kidnapping, extortion, and human trafficking. According to Trump, this is not immigration. It's weaponized infiltration. What is Liberation Day? Liberation Day is a symbolic rebuke of weak border policies, globalist trade agreements, the normalization of hostile regimes. April 2nd is now being framed as a turning point, the day the U.S. reclaims control over who enters, what deals it signs, and how it protects its sovereignty. Trump has vowed to make this an annual milestone if reelected, a moment to assess and purge foreign infiltration in government, trade, and border security. The tariff strategy. Unlike traditional sanctions, this policy doesn't just punish Venezuela, it punishes Venezuela's buyers. Trump's logic is simple. If you fund the Maduro regime, you are complicit. If you support Venezuela's economy, you enable criminal exports. Therefore, you will pay a price at the U.S. border. The proposed 25% tariff targets any nation that imports Venezuelan crude, has energy partnerships with PDVSA, Venezuela's state oil company, resells Venezuelan oil via third-party channels, reviving wartime powers. Under Trump's leadership, the U.S. is expanding its use of wartime powers for domestic protection. Executive Order 138 Global Magnitsky Act, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, EPA, National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA enforcement. These give the president broad discretion to seize assets, block trade, deport foreign nationals deemed threats. According to insiders, Trump is using this authority to fast-track deportations of suspected criminals from Venezuela and neighboring nations. Who gets hit? Several countries are now in the crosshairs. China, a major buyer of Venezuelan crude. India has continued refining Venezuelan oil despite sanctions. Spain and Portugal, allegedly involved in fuel swap deals. Caribbean nations, some import subsidized fuel from Caracas. If these nations continue dealing with Venezuela, their exports to the U.S. could face steep tariffs, disrupting trade and diplomacy. Oil markets in turmoil. Oil markets reacted immediately. Brent crude spiked on fears of reduced supply chains. Refiners scrambled to resource crude. Geopolitical analysts warned of retaliatory tariffs from targeted countries. But Trump remains unmoved. America must stop subsidizing its own invasion, he said in a recent speech. If you fund our enemies, you lose access to our markets. What critics say. Opponents argue the policy is economically disruptive, dangerous to U.S. alliances, prone to triggering a global trade war. But supporters counter that this is the first serious response to weaponized migration in modern history. The U.S. has the leverage, and it's time to use it. A new kind of foreign policy. Trump isn't playing by the old rules of diplomacy. This is realpolitik with teeth. Migration is now treated as a national security threat. Trade is no longer free if it empowers hostile regimes. Diplomacy is conditional on domestic safety. With the reactivation of these wartime powers, America is entering a new era. Economic containment as border defense. Final thoughts. Liberation through leverage. Whether you agree with the policy or not, one thing is clear. Trump is reshaping the way America responds to foreign threats. Not just with boots on the ground, but with tariffs, deportations, and targeted pressure. The Venezuela oil crackdown is just the beginning. Liberation Day is more than rhetoric. It's economic warfare for national survival. Subscribe for more raw geopolitical analysis, real-world strategy, and border truth bombs the media won't touch.